Sanibonani, welcome back to another episode of Hearty Thursdays. Ngumama Wezizwe, and I'm here to fill your hearts with art. In this podcast, we talk about art. We talk to the people that make the art, the people behind the people that make the art, and to the people that make the art, but a lot of people don't know that they do. And today we are so excited to have a performer, choreographer, writer, spoken word artist, facilitator, lecturer, talented, beautiful artist, Grace Storm. Welcome.
Beep, 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 beep. I'm joking. Hi.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me here, Mama. It's good
How
to be
are
here.
you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for honoring my invitation. It really means a lot.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
So who is Grace Storm?
I don't like this question.
I know.
In a nutshell, I like to say I'm a performing artist because that encompasses everything. But I'm a teacher. I mean, you said it, choreographer, but all-round artist is what I say. Lover of art, with deep love and passion for teaching. I'll just leave it there. Otherwise, I'll go on forever.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What is your honors degree and where did you study?
I studied at Wits. I did my honors in dramatic arts, and later on went back to do my master's in applied theatre as well. So come from a performance acting theatrical background. Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you ever danced?
I do actually. It was in church. I was 8. And I think that's what birthed my love for dancing particularly. I even remember what I was wearing. I was wearing like white stockings and this white flowy dress. And you know in the church with the ribbons, with the ribbons and the cloth. So I even remember the song's name. It's crazy. It was a song called In Your Presence. That was the name of the song. But I still remember that like very vividly. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And do you remember the first time you ever rolled?
I do. That's actually a bit of a sad one. Grade 8. So I was homeschooled up until 7th grade. And then in grade 8, I went to like public school for the first time. And I struggled to make friends. Like I had social anxiety. And I remember during break times, I used to stay in class. I was like too scared to go out to make any friends. And I was very influenced by hip hop at the time. Like I loved hip hop. And I just started writing like in whack rhymes, like whack ones. But I spent like weeks at break times, like just writing in the class. So I think that's where my love for writing particularly started. Not a great start, but I mean, I don't regret starting. So, yeah.
And then poetry, when did it come?
Poetry came later. I mean, poetry is rap. Poetry is hip hop,
poetry,
you know.
Yeah.
Exactly. But when I think more when I consciously came into it, was only in first year varsity when I started seeing a lot more spoken word and that being a thing. And I was like, what is this? This is pretty cool. And then sort of my love for poetry and interest in like reading poetry and attending more events where people were actually performing poetry. So then I started adapting my writing to that. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And you got your MA cum laude. And that's like, oh wow, congratulations. That's
Thank you.
That's really amazing. Tell me about this qualification.
Process, hey, because 2020, COVID. So got in for my master's, very excited. The first 6 weeks, we were going into class. Also trying to get back into things because it had been 4 years since I finished. So now going back into studying was like a whole mission. And the first 6 weeks were great. And then lockdown happened. And, doing a performing arts degree or course online is the worst thing you can do. And I remember even at that time, like wanting to like defer and be like, because we were also figuring out how do you Zoom a class in performance and all of that. So it was a tough one pushing through. But my research was performance practice based. So my research was through performance, and I was actually very interested in looking at society's perception of women's bodies and how, as a female, as a woman, you can consciously work through changing the perception of society, that you don't have to be a certain way. You don't have to dress a certain way. You don't have to look a certain way. I don't have to have long hair to be considered a woman, so to speak. So I was using sort of performative research, simple acts like putting on heels or putting on stockings or putting on makeup, and the repetition of that and what it does to the body. Because eventually you're like, why am I doing all of this and for who? So my research was based on that, was embodied practice to reach a consciousness awareness of, I don't have to fit the norm of what society says just to be considered a woman. So that was the basis of my research. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's very, very interesting. What do you teach?
I teach dramatic arts and dance. So I'm in the very field that I studied. So I teach high schoolers, tough crowd there, but we make it. But I've taught primary, but now I'm teaching high school. Drama and performance.
How is it like teaching art?
I love it. I think for me, being able to pass on to others like what brings joy for me, I think is one of the most amazing things. And it's also like that light bulb moment, you know, in a student or anyone, that when that light switches on, for me, that's such a beautiful thing when they realize something new, and especially when it's through the arts, or they just make a discovery about themselves through arts. For me, that's like where the magic is.
Oh, wow, that's really nice. A lot of people struggle to juggle like being an artist or a creative and personal lives, when it's also being a teacher. You have like another profession, plus you're like a performer, plus there's a personal life. How do you do it?
I sometimes feel like being an artist is my personal life. I don't know if that makes sense. And it's not in the way that you think like, oh no, that means you don't have your own life outside of the arts. But I think everything I do, even in all the work that I do, even all the side hustles that I do, it just feels like it's part of my life. It's not something I separate from the two. So even going into my 9 to 5 every day to teach, it doesn't feel like a job because I'm doing what I love anyway. So it's not, for me, I don't think of them as separate things. I don't know.
So it is true that do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life.
It's very true. It's very true.
Oh, wow. Tell me about Regression.
Ooh, Regression. You're taking me far, girl. Are you asking me about Regression? Regression was a piece that I choreographed in 2017. And so in my choreography and my dance, I'm very interested in storytelling, particularly looking at the human condition, like what makes us feel certain things. Why do we do certain things? And Regression looked at sort of the human capacity, or the way that we move forward in life and somehow we regress, right, to our former selves. And it looked at sort of at what point do we break past that boundary of like returning to old habits. So I was just interested in that, and I created that movement piece. Looking at how we regress and what do we need to do to break past that.
Oh, wow. Was it your first piece?
Not my first choreographed piece. My first choreographed piece was Slip.
I know. Yeah.
That was it was my 4th year. Like we had to, as part of our choreography major, we had to create a piece. And that's also when my interest in duets became a thing. So I'm very interested in working with two bodies in a space and seeing the differences, seeing how they can actually complement each other. And Slip also, again, looked at the human condition of us depending on each other and what makes that dependency grow. Like, why do we depend on each other? What happens when we break away? And this can be in relationships, in friendships, in family. So I played a lot with sort of weight and the images that I was creating to sort of tell the story of dependency, codependency, what's good about it, what's bad about it. That was my first baby.
And it was part of 2 festivals. How was that?
It was. That was crazy. That was actually crazy because I think at the time when I entered, like, you know, you write your proposal in and you're like, it's probably not going to even like make it through. But the first one it made it to was the Baxter Dance Festival in Cape Town. So the Baxter at the Baxter Theatre. So it was performed there with, I mean, the program was like amazing. All these choreographers from all over South Africa showcasing their work. And I was like, I'm just here, fourth year student doing their work. But I think it also showed me the possibility of, you know, where it could go. And then straight after that, I was like, I'm going to keep pushing this. And so entered it into the Joya Festival that happened at the Joburg Theatre as well. And yeah, did a stint over there too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Tell me about Breathe.
Breathe, girl. Okay. Breathe. Breathe is an interesting one because weirdly enough, I'm trying to bring it back at the end of this year.
Yeah.
Breathe was choreographed as part of the Tunya Le Role festival that happened at the Sibikwa Arts Center. And it focused on female choreographers. Okay. So at the time, I've never actually had to speak about this in real time. The period I was starting to choreograph, the initial idea was not what it became. But that year, I'd lost my best friend of 27 years. So at that time, I somehow was like, I feel like I need to do a piece on grief because it was my first experience of loss, like real losing someone so close, and the process of grieving for me was so interesting. I was like, you know, people say you go through the stages, and we're like, the stages are not real. That's not how everyone deals with it. So for me, I wanted to look at grief. What does grief feel like? Not looking at it as like it should look a certain way, but how does it feel? And for me, it felt like being unable to breathe. So Breathe focused on that basically. It looked at the process of grief as looking for breath. And I decided to do the piece in silence, which I think heightened the tension in the room. So there were moments where I required the performers to actually hold their breath. And what happened also in the audience, it caused them to hold their breath because you're sort of like wanting them to breathe, and you find that tension in the room. And I wanted to recreate the feeling of not being able to breathe because you've lost something, or not being able to speak. So it was quite a very close to heart piece that I did. And yeah, I'm hoping to bring it back before this year ends. It's already ending. Before this year ends. Yeah, because I think also people can relate to it because the concept of grief as well, as it's not linear, you know, but you can sort of describe the feeling of it. And usually it's that struggle to speak, that struggle to share, the struggle to breathe, and you just don't know where it sits sort of in the body. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's very interesting. Take me through the process or journey of choreographing a piece. Like before you reset, take me through that process.
So I love to do devised work, especially if I'm working with other bodies, which is what I love. So I love to choreograph for other bodies or like with them. So I prefer to like see my work on stage as opposed to being in it. And usually I love devising work with the performers so that they can work to what their strengths are, as opposed to me choreographing a piece and saying, okay, you do this. And then there's sort of that struggle, you know, because for me, movers are different. They have different body types. They have different strengths. So they move differently. And for me, I always want to work to what complements that. So in my work, I'll always have a concept. So the theme is always the thing. So I'll say, for example, the theme is grief. And then I'll do a series of exercises with them that requires them to find it in their own body. And in that process is when now we take whatever movements they've got and I say, okay, this stands out. Let's work on this and let's refine that and see where it goes. Oh. So there's always sort of like the process is ongoing with them as opposed to me just coming in and saying, learn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That way also the performers are more in tune with it because it's their own experience of the theme or, the topic that we're doing.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow, that's very interesting. I always wished I knew how to dance. Like, I used to dance, but like, it's just like, Yeah, I wanna, like, sometimes it's just you can't express some things with words. You
Yeah.
can't, but like you just need to move and just, yeah. Tell me about the best, or like what you would consider the best dance routine that you've seen or done.
On the spot here. One that I always refer to, or if I ever like show someone like this, you have to see this piece. It's a piece by Akram Khan called Dust. And they performed it at this like concert sort of stage. So it was like almost like, I mean, think FNB Stadium type thing, and that's the stage, and then you just have this, this sea of people watching. But it was titled Dust, and it particularly looks at how humans, or the idea of we return to dust, we come from dust, we return to dust. Okay. So it was really focused on sort of the physicality and the being birthed and then the returning back. And I thought it was like just the way, I mean, he had over 40 performers on the stage, and they were like moving like one. And that for me was like, how do you even get to that level of perfection?
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that's the one.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. I'd love to see it. Tell me about your first double series collection of short poems.
Yeah, so my first babies, titled With Time. So that's the first one. And the second one goes into a book called or titled Light. And this is it over here. Yes. So it's actually literally a 2-in-1. So once you're done with the first one, you flip it over and then you continue. So it reads as a series. So you have to first read With Time. Okay. With Time was written a very interesting point in life. I had relocated to China. So I spent 2 years there teaching at an arts company there. And when I had left, it's always a breakup story. It's always gonna be a breakup story. And it was quite an intense one. It was one of those like where like just like you just ghost, like you just fell off the face of the earth. And I think processing that was difficult because the family was also processing it, because that's how deep it was already with families. Yeah. And me on the other side in another country by myself, like figuring out like what this is. I didn't write with the intention to have a book. It was just me having these poems for myself to process. So With Time sort of reads from trying to understand the feeling of abandonment and like why was I left type of thing, to then realizing, oh, like I'm going through this self-discovery now and actually finding ways to heal from the perception of like you leaving has got nothing to do with me, so now I'm removing myself from the situation. Yes. And then Light then speaks about the possibility of finding love again from self, and then sort of getting back into the process of falling in love with someone again, and how that possibility exists after hurt. Yeah.
Oh, wow. This is very interesting. And then how was the publishing process? Because this was like your first book, right?
Sorry?
Was it your first book?
It was, yeah. Yes. It was the first. I was also in another country. So I actually launched this when I was in China. So in my second year there, I put the book together. And I basically self-published there because the laws and everything is different. So I got my friend to design the cover for me. I designed the other cover myself. Went through the editing myself as well, like proofread myself, because I actually worked as a proofreader. So I'm like, I can just proofread my own book. Oh, so it helped because I also felt very precious about it. I was afraid of going through publishers who's going to be like, yeah, change this and this. And I really just wanted this book to be what it is, as raw as it is. And With Time is actually interactive. So there's parts in the book where there are unfinished poems where I want the reader to fill in themselves. Wow. And then there's drawings where like you can just scribble and sort of whatever you're feeling after reading, you can do that. Oh, and for me, I wanted to keep that aspect. I didn't want it to be like, oh, this is weird. Why would you? I wanted just the reader, for me specifically, to experience exactly what it was that I'm going through, and have a space for them to express. So self-published, got printers, got everything done myself, and yeah, it was actually easier that way. Yeah.
Wow. Tell me about Love and Other Stuff.
Love and Other Stuff, the other book over there. So I released Love and Other Stuff last year in September. And Love and Others, it's love and other stuff. But it's very themed. So it centers around love, obviously, is the first one. And I look at the idea of love, what love should feel like, what love is, what love could be. And then there's a section called Intermissions. Intermissions looks at the weird process between when you're like thinking of leaving a situation that's toxic. So like that limbo moment where you're not sure if you should stay and fight or if you should leave because you know you deserve better. And that one is Intermissions. And then there's a section on grief, because I think since my friend's passing, I've been so interested in unpacking what is grief. And particularly...
What would you say grief is?
As I'll quote one of my pieces, I always say grief is an unwanted visitor knocking at your door. And I personify grief as this woman who just sits on a bench in a park and sort of waiting to, I don't use the word torment, but she's just there. It's there all the time. You can't escape it. You try and walk through the park and have a nice day, and she's sitting there in all black, just waiting for you to sit with her, unexpected. So I personify grief a lot in the book, and try and describe it as that, as this woman figure who shows up unwanted, but you have to sit with her. Like, you don't have a choice. The only way to get through the park on the rest of the walk is to sit with her and deal with her, and then you can continue. So yeah, look at it from that perspective.
That's very interesting. When you first got to China, how was it? I've never been outside of South Africa, and I'm always interested. Like, when
you should
people
go. You have to travel. Travel. Yeah.
I'm trying to get.
If you have the opportunity to do it, like, do it. Even if it's like here on our continent, to actually just travel. China was interesting. Firstly, I landed. It was winter, and it was minus 19 on the day that I landed. It was like freezing. We don't know that cold over here. Yeah, and it was scary because I didn't know what to expect. I also did no research on the place. I don't know why. I was that person. So I also went with the ignorance of what we see China as in movies, right? So I was like, I remember even packing my stuff, and my mom was like, "You're not even taking any like nice shoes. You're like, aren't you gonna go out?" I was like, "There's no clubs in China. What are you doing? Why? Why am I taking?" No, literally. And I think that moment also made me realize the ignorance that exists. Generally, because even when we look at the way that the West views us, it's that concept, right? And I was like, we are actually all guilty of that to some extent. And when I got there, it was like nothing at all like what I expected, like at all. It's basically like anywhere else in the world, or I said it's like the West, but just in Chinese. That's literally the only difference. But everything else, like sometimes there were times I'm like, I didn't even realize I'm in China until someone spoke, because everything just looked, I mean, there were malls, there were everything. It's basically like any big city that's here. So yeah, I think that really flipped me to be like, do your research, girl.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm still trying to plan my traveling.
You should.
Yeah. How did poetry start? Like, I know it started first year when you was like seeing people being there, getting them snaps. But then, like, how did it start, like, for you and with you, like, in your space? Like, the first time you was like, okay, I'm writing this down, I'm gonna go perform it.
My first performance was only in 2015, 2015 was the first time I performed one of my pieces. You're the most terrifying thing ever. Like, I choked, I was like sweaty, I couldn't it was nerve-wracking. I remember it was actually some poetry thing happening at Joburg Theatre, and there was an open mic section, and then I was like, you know what, I'm doing this. And before, like I was writing and I was sharing my stuff on social media, on Facebook. Facebook was most the in thing, when Facebook still had notes. For those who will remember, Facebook had a section for notes, and that's where I wrote all my poems. And I used to get like good like reception. People used to comment and like say they relate. And I think after watching a few, I was like, you know what, let's try this thing. Like it was terrifying. I wouldn't say I hated it, but when I left, I was like, I'm never doing this again. Like this was horrible. But somehow I just enjoyed the moments that I didn't mess up. Was that reception of having this immediate sort of contact with an audience member who's like, I actually get what you're saying. Like that resonates with me. And for me, that was like, okay, let's give it let's be more serious about this. Yeah. So that's the first time I performed. And then from there, I just like started doing my open mics and like getting more courage. Also because I had still coming from like hectic social anxiety, which is such a contradiction because I went into performance, but I have like this social anxiety. So poetry for me actually pushed me past that anxiety that I had and fear that I had of audience. Which is why I think it's so precious for me as well, because it grew me from the person that I was. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So in March, you were selected for the Hear My Voice poetry retreat. How was that experience?
That was amazing. Also, one of those situations are like, enter. And they're like, yeah, there's like over 200 applicants. I'm like, what are the chances? And then there I was. But it's actually crazy because in the beginning of the year, I said, I want to do more stuff in poetry. Like I receive, like I'm opening myself up to whatever comes. And somehow like that manifestation came through. And so the retreat with Hear My Voice was really, firstly, the experience with other poets, which I was like, this is amazing to be in a space secluded from the outside world where you can just have conversations with other poets and also talk about, what the state of poetry is and like why we do poetry and how poetry can change things as well. So we were in Mpumalanga in the middle of nowhere, beautiful mountains and views just like shut out. And it's amazing how spaces can actually influence your writing and like have that inspiration. At the time, I was going through a block for like 4 months. I hadn't written anything. And watching others perform actually then broke my block, which was very strange because you'd think, okay, just sitting by myself and trying to write works. But I think I needed that space of just pure poetry and watching people, enjoy their passion of poetry as well. And that sort of just like opened the floodgates to writing again. But I think more than anything, for me, I wanted to be there to witness, I want to take in as much as I can. I want to see what other people are writing about. I want to hear about their experiences. And in turn, that just also fueled me again. Yeah.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. Oh my goodness. So how do you find these things? Is it word of mouth? Is it through social media? Are you following like any specific?
It's mixed, I'd say. That specific Hear My Voice retreat, someone shared with me, sent me a WhatsApp with the poster and then was like, you should enter. Like, I saw this, I thought of you. But then I think mostly also like following pages that have those things. Sometimes, but sometimes you miss things on social media because there's so much going on.
Yeah.
But I know like I've got some people who will share stuff directly. If it's got to do with poetry or dance, they'll literally just like, I saw this, it made me think of you. So I think also it's really good to have people like that who know like what you do and you'll probably be interested in. I know I do it a lot as well. So it's a mix of things. It's a mix of, I usually don't go looking, so I don't like intentionally will, but if something pops up and I'm like, okay, this looks nice, then I'll give it a go.
And then like with things like going to teach China, is it minimum requirement degree or honors degree in art?
China is very strict. I will say that China is probably one of the strictest countries with education and how to get a work permit there. Okay. So like you cannot get a work permit without a BA. Like if you don't have an actual degree in any, whatever it is you're going into, you have to have at least a BA. And then now recently post-COVID, you had even got like more strict, because I was planning to go back straight after I'm done with my master's, and then it just got like so complex. So even now, if you're going to teach, you have to have a teaching license. Like they don't take you in other than that. And then also now they're like, you have to be from a native English speaking country. Whereas before, if you're teaching English, for example, any country you're from and you can speak English regardless of what your first language or your accent is. Now they're like, no, like you have to be native speaking country. So it's gotten a bit more complex to get in. Yeah.
Oh wow, I know someone who's actually that side. Yeah, we are social media friends.
Okay, whereabouts are they? Do you know which like city?
No,
Okay.
No, I have no idea. Okay. But yeah, she's always posting, and she's always like she's happy. I did ask her also.
Yeah.
Then she was like, yeah, man, I can Google and things like that. She did try to like share some stuff and all of that. Not that I'm interested to go teach. I don't think I have the passion. And I think it's unfair to be a teacher when you don't have the passion, because like you're working with minds, and minds is like very, very
It's unfair
delicate.
on you too. It's not easy to be a teacher. I literally had the conversation this morning about, I was like, this has to be a passion, because the level of patience required, like you can't just fetch from anywhere. Like, and people who also say like, oh, it's so nice to be a teacher, you guys get holidays. I'm like, no, it's not. It's not. We don't have actual holidays. That's not real. But yeah.
Oh wow. And then how are the preparations going for the, I don't want to pronounce it wrong, but where you going in October
Requiem.
in Mexico?
Requiem for Justice. That's also huge. I actually just got my visa this week, so that was like, oh, okay, now it's real, because until that happened, it wasn't. But it's this big social justice festival happening in Mexico. I'm very nervous because I don't know the piece here yet, and it's like in 3 weeks. But they're going. The piece is ready. I think I just need to now get into the zone. I think I was waiting for things to be finalized, and not, let my eggs hatch before their time. So it's going. Yeah, it's coming along. Yeah.
And it's funny how I said in October and we are actually in October.
It's
like
like
the
now.
year is like over, like
Crazy.
finished, done.
Yeah.
And I hope we're gonna see breathe before it actually ends. I really, really, really hope so.
I hope so too. Please put pressure on me so that I can do it.
I'll try my best, I promise. How do people find you? Socials?
On social media, I go as I am Grey Storm. So that's Instagram, Facebook, kind of Twitter. I don't know if Twitter's real. I hadn't been on Twitter for 7 years, and I like got back like 3 months ago, and then I forgot that I was back on. So it's there, but nothing's happening. I was off for 7 years, and I don't even know why I went back, because I literally forget about it. And then that's it. So Instagram, TikTok, it's I'm White Rainbow. Don't ask me about that name. But I'm Grey Storm.
Do you have a YouTube channel?
I do have a YouTube channel also. I am Grey Storm. You can find me there.
And then if people want to buy a book, do they DM you? Is that okay?
Slide into my DMs for the books, not anything else. Thank you. You can DM me, pop me an email. I've got my details also on my Instagram if you want to email, and then you can order directly with me. It is also like on Amazon and ebooks, but I mean, if you're here and you can get the books faster, you can just get them from me. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
It means a lot. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching and for listening. Please make sure that you tune in next week, Thursday, for another episode. The podcast is available on YouTube, obviously. We're going to edit that out. It used to be available on Spotify and Podbean. Please make sure that you subscribe, like, share, and comment. If you would like to advertise your product or brand, please send us an email. If you would like to be a part of our community and you're working on a project, do send us an email. The email is mamaforwork@gmail.com, which is MAMMA, the number 4work@gmail.com. This is Umama Wezizwa Sibia, and I hope I am leaving you with a heart full of art.